The sound of broken silence. My name is Margaret Collins. I'm 51 years old, and until recently, I thought I knew every inch of my daughter's life. Her smile, her quirks, even the small gestures of someone born from my body. But nothing prepared me for the sound she would make that night, the sound of a broken silence, that kind of sound that doesn't come from a scream, but from a truth that has been bottled up for too long. It was a cold Thursday in February in Portland, Oregon. I was making dinner, the same rosemary chicken I'd been making since her father, Thomas, left us. The clock read 7:42 when I heard the front door slam. I thought it was the wind, but soon I heard footsteps, quick. Firm, determined. "Mom, we need to talk." Her voice sounded different. Quiet, but filled with something I couldn't name. I dropped the ladle into the pot and looked at it. Evelyn was standing in the kitchen doorway, her face pale, her eyes watery, the kind of look that mixes guilt and courage. "Are you okay, my love? What happened?" She hesitated. Then she took a deep breath. "It's about Dad. I think you need to know something." My heart sank. Her father, that name still had the power to paralyze the air. Thomas had left home almost 10 years ago, after a betrayal that destroyed everything we had between us. What exactly, Evelyn? She sat at the table. The yellowish light from the kitchen cast shadows on her face. He wasn't who you thought he was. For a second, everything was silent, even the wind outside seemed to stop. It was the first time in my entire life that I was afraid of my own daughter. Photography of the past. Evelyn placed an envelope on the table. White, no name, no sender. It could be anything, a bill, a document, a letter. But I knew the moment I saw his face that it wasn't something that could be fixed with a phone call. "I got this 3 weeks ago." I thought about throwing it away, but I needed to show you. Aubrey is an envelope. Inside was a photograph, old, a little faded, but perfectly clear. In it, Thomas was hugging a young woman. She wasn't the lover I knew, it was another, and in this woman's arms there was a child, Evelyn. "What is this?" She bit her lip, tears beginning to fall. "That's me, Mom. This picture was taken before you and Dad got married." Her words echoed inside me as if time had been torn apart. For a moment, the ground seemed to give way. "That's impossible. I was there when you were born. I saw you being born." She shook her head. "I thought so too. Until I saw what's behind the photo." I turned the paper over. On the back was a note in faded ink. "Evelyn, 1998. More, Leah." Leah. The name sounded distant and familiar at the same time. Thomas had mentioned a Leah once, years ago, as someone who meant nothing. But now, I was facing proof that this woman meant everything. Leah's shadow. That night, sleep wouldn't come. I sat on the edge of my bed, the photograph on the pillow beside me. The woman in the image, Leah, looked so peaceful, almost ethereal. She had dark, curly hair and a serene smile that contrasted with the pain I felt at that moment. Evelyn slept in the next room, having cried herself to sleep. I heard her light, slow breathing and wondered, who were we, after all? Thomas and I had built a life based on predictable routines, bills paid, birthdays celebrated, bearable silences. After his betrayal, I swore the past would stay locked away. I'd forgiven him enough to move on, but not enough to forget. Now, I realized that forgetting had been a kind of willful blindness. I picked up my phone and, almost without thinking, typed the name Leah Carter into Google. Hundreds of results. Some obituaries, old social media profiles, newspaper articles. Nothing seemed to fit, until I found a photo of a community college in Eugene, Oregon, dated 2000. There she was. The same smile. The same woman from the photograph. My chest tightened. The article was about an assistant professor of literature who had left her position suddenly, without explanation, and at the bottom of the page, a small, almost invisible detail. Survivor of a complicated birth in 1998. My heart froze. The same year as Evelyn's birth. At that moment, the air in the room became heavy. The pieces were beginning to fall into place, but the picture they formed was too ugly to accept. I closed the laptop and stood there, staring out the window at the reflection of my own shadow on the glass. For the first time, I understood that truth can have a sound, and hers was the sound of breath trapped in her chest, ready to explode. The hidden letters. The next morning, Evelyn was still asleep when I went down to the basement. That place always gave me chills. The smell of damp wood, the sound of creaking pipes, the feeling that the past lived there, stacked in old boxes. I found what I was looking for, a dust-covered shoebox with the name Thomas, personal papers hand-scribbled. Inside was everything, old bills, work tickets, a pair of cufflinks. But deep down, wrapped in tissue paper, were cards, more than a dozen of them, all signed by Leah. I sat down on the cold floor and began to read. The first letter was dated April 1998. Tom, she was born. She's perfect. But the doctor said I might not be able to raise her alone. If you still have feelings, come. She deserves to know who her father is. My whole body trembled. I read and reread those lines until the words became jumbled. The letters that followed spoke of broken promises, unanswered phone calls, hope turning to despair. The last era of July 1998, 3 months before my wedding to Thomas. If you're really going to get married, take her with you. Don't leave her without a father. At least that, Tom. I closed my eyes. What was once a doubt has become a certainty. Evelyn was not the product of my marriage. She was the secret Thomas brought as a dowry, and I, blinded by the illusion of love, agreed to create the symbol of his betrayal as if it were my redemption. Tears fell onto the paper, blurring Leah's words, blurring the past and present. That's when I realized that the deepest pain didn't come from his lie, but from mine, because, somehow, I always knew. Peter's silence. For 2 days I walked around the house like a stranger. I avoided the mirror. I avoided my daughter's gaze. I even avoided the sound of the phone ringing. When I finally answered, it was Peter, Thomas's older brother. His voice was hoarse, laced with something I could only call regret. Margaret. We need to talk. About what you found. He knew. Of course I knew. We met at an old cafe in downtown Portland. The kind of place where the past feels more real than the present. Peter arrived late, wearing the same coat as always and the weary look of someone who's been carrying a secret for too long. As soon as he sat down, I placed the cards on the table, one on top of the other. He looked at them without touching them, as if the papers might burn. Did he tell you anything? I asked. Peter shook his head. Thomas never had the courage. Leah. She was more than a fling, Margaret. They met in college, before you. He always said she was the love of his life, until he found out she was pregnant. My stomach churned. So? I whispered, then our father intervened. He said an illegitimate child would ruin Thomas's career. Leah was poor, the daughter of immigrants. Our father convinced her the child would have a better life with you. He said you'd never know. And she accepted. But she never recovered. Peter looked away, and I saw tears forming in the corners of his eyes. He opened his wallet and took out a yellowed photo, Leah with a newborn baby in her arms. Evelyn, I couldn't breathe. It was the same photo I found in the trunk. How do you have this? I asked, my voice trembling. Because she gave it to me before she left, he replied. She asked me to give it to Thomas. If he ever had the courage to be a father. A silence stretched between us, thick, suffocating. Outside, the traffic passed by indifferently, as if the world hadn't ended in front of that table, and it was there, in that nameless cafe, that I realized, the truth does not destroy, it only shows what was already in ruins. The weight of truth. I returned home before sunset. Evelyn was on the couch, reading a history book. She looked up and smiled, a smile that, until that day, I thought was my reflection. Now, I saw Leah there, the same way of holding the book, the same frown. I sat next to her, trying to hide the trembling in my hands. Mom, is everything okay? She asked. I meant yes, but how do you say yes when your whole life has just changed, Evie? There's something I need to tell you. Those words came out slowly, as if they weighed tons. I told him everything. The letters, the photo, Leah, Peter, the past. She listened in silence, her face still, until finally tears began to fall. So. Daddy. He's not the man I thought. No, I replied. And I'm not the mother you imagined either. Evelyn cried softly, and I hugged her, not as someone trying to fix it, but as someone recognizing a pain that has no cure. That night, she slept on my lap, and I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Thomas was no longer with us. An accident had taken him 2 years ago. But the echo of his lies still inhabited every wall of that house. Now I knew what I had to do. I grabbed my laptop, opened the spreadsheet of my life. The bills, the years, the losses, and created a new tab, True. In the first cell, I wrote just one sentence. My name is Margaret Carter, and this is the story of Leah, and of the daughter she unknowingly entrusted to me. I closed the computer. Tomorrow, I would tell this story to the world, not as revenge, but as liberation. Because sometimes, forgiveness is not forgetting, it's just letting go of what was never yours. Publishing the truth, dawn arrived slowly, dyeing the sky a pale gray. As the coffee brewed, I thought about how many mornings like that I had lived in silence, serving lukewarm smiles and hiding cracks with routine. But that one was different. That morning, I was no longer just Margaret, the perfect wife. I was a woman with a story no one wanted to hear, and now the world would hear. I opened my laptop and reread the text I had written the night before. I read each word with the same care. As someone touching an old wound, checking to see if it still hurts, and it hurt, but for the first time, the pain didn't paralyze me. It pushed me. I wrote the title, To Leah, the woman who taught me what love is, even without knowing it. I added an old photo of Thomas with Evelyn, still a baby, his face smiling at the camera, hers, innocent and full of future. And then I wrote the body of the message. For years, I lived a life that wasn't entirely my own. We created a daughter who carries the blood of another woman, a woman who was erased to protect a man's name. Today, I decide not to protect anyone anymore, because silence is also a form of lying. I hesitated with the cursor blinking in front of the button, Post. The sound of the wind outside seemed to encourage me. I clicked. For a moment, nothing happened. But inside me, something loosened, as if an invisible anchor had finally been cut. I closed the laptop and stood in front of the window. The street below was the same, people going to work, dogs barking, the mailman turning the corner. But I knew nothing would be the same. 2 hours later, the cell phone started vibrating. Notifications, messages, calls, people sharing, commenting, asking questions, some with indignation, others with empathy. Within minutes, the story spread. In the midst of it all, a name appeared on the screen, Evelyn. A short message, Mom. People are texting me. Someone from Leah's family has contacted me. They want to meet you. My heart raced. The story had crossed time, and the past, once again, knocked on the door. Leah's face. 3 days later, I was standing in front of a small cafe in Oakland, California, the same neighborhood where Leah had lived for the past few years, according to the comments that poured in on my post. Upon entering, the smell of fresh bread and ground coffee mingled with the soft sound of piano music. I sat by the window, my heart racing, my hands cold. I still didn't know who I was going to meet, and then, a woman walked in, dark skin, curly hair tied in a simple bun. Intense and gentle eyes. She approached slowly, holding a small wooden box. Are you Margaret? He asked, his voice low but firm, absent. She introduced herself, Amira, daughter of Leah. My breath caught. She was Evelyn's sister, half-sister, but the blood and the look said something deeper. We sat down. She placed the box on the table. My mother kept this to herself for years. She knew one day the truth would come out. She said that when it did, someone named Margaret would understand. I opened the box carefully. Inside was an old VCR tape, a photo of Leah smiling with a baby in her arms, and a letter. The envelope was yellowed, the handwriting soft, almost shy. To Margaret, I don't hate you. On the contrary, I am grateful that you loved my daughter. Life doesn't always let us choose the role we have to play, but sometimes love gets in the way. Care for her as if she were your own, and one day, when the world is ready, tell the truth. With love, Leah. The words hit me like a silent wave. I cried. I cried for Leah, for myself, for Evelyn, for all the women who had to love in silence. Amira reached out and took my hand. My mother forgave you a long time ago, he said, and in that touch, I realized that maybe peace doesn't come when everything is explained, but when, finally, we stop hiding. 2 feet. I took the tape home like someone carrying a living secret. Along the way, the world seemed distant. People talked, cars passed, the sun set slowly, but none of it reached me. When I got home, I placed the tape on the living room table. The old, dusty video recorder had been sitting in the closet for years, a vestige of simpler times. As I connected the cables, my hands were shaking. I felt a mixture of fear and curiosity, fear of what I might hear, curiosity about what would finally be revealed. When I pressed play, the screen hissed, then the image appeared, Leah. She was sitting in a blue armchair, wearing a simple dress, her eyes shining as if they were looking straight at me through the years. The recording was old, perhaps from when Evelyn was still a baby. She began to speak, and her voice was calm, almost maternal. If you are watching this, Margaret, it is because time has done what I could not do. Tell the truth. I never wanted to steal anything from you. I loved Thomas, yes, but I never fought to have him. When he found out about the pregnancy, he wanted to do the right thing, but fear got the better of him. He said the world would never understand, that a scandal would destroy everything. I let him go, and when he said he would raise Evelyn with you, I accepted, because, deep down, what I wanted most was for her to be loved. The image shook a little, and Leah smiled, tears in her eyes. But love doesn't fade, Margaret, neither mine for her, nor yours for him. I just hope that one day, when she grows up, she knows that two women, very different, but equally wounded, fought for her to have a complete life, and that, perhaps, this is also love. When the tape ended, I couldn't move. The room was silent, the only sound the soft echo of the VCR's motor stopping. I stood there for long minutes, feeling each word fit into places inside me that previously only held pain. Leah hadn't been my enemy, she had been my mirror. That night, I slept little. But for the first time, my sleep was light, because I knew what I needed to do, show Evelyn the truth. What's left of love. Evelyn arrived the next day, unannounced. When I opened the door, she looked different, not just more grown up, but firmer, with an expression that was a mix of hurt and curiosity. I saw the video, Mom, he said directly. How? I asked, surprised. Amira sent me the file. She said you deserved me to watch it too. We entered in silence. I placed 2 cups of tea on the table. She sat across from me, her face illuminated by the late afternoon light. For a while, neither of us spoke. You knew all along? She asked, her voice trembling. I shook my head. No. I found out the same day you did. And the father? I closed my eyes for a moment before answering. He knew. And he chose silence. Evelyn took a deep breath, fighting back tears. I wonder how many lies we learned to call love. We fell silent again, then she looked at me, not as a daughter, not as an accuser, but as someone who finally understands that love can be imperfect and still true. I took her hand and said, Evelyn, I raised you with everything I had. Even without knowing everything, I loved you with all the truth I knew. She squeezed my hand back. I know, Mom. And I think Leah knew too. That night, we went to the sea together, the same place Thomas used to take Evelyn when she was a child. The wind blew cold, but the air felt clean. We scattered the symbolic ashes of a white rose Evelyn brought, a tribute to the 2 mothers who loved her in different ways. As the flower disappeared into the waves, she whispered, Now I understand. Sometimes forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about stopping carrying. We hugged, and the sound of the sea mingled with our breathing. I felt, for the first time in years, that the story had finally found its endpoint, or perhaps, its true beginning. My name is Margaret, and this was the story of 2 women who loved the same child, and of a daughter who needed to know the whole truth to free herself. If you also believe that silence can be a prison, share this story. And if you want to keep hearing real stories like this, subscribe to the channel. Because the next one could be yours.